Welcome back to T2T Network, and this is New York Giants Corner, baby. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of New York Giants Corner. I am Joe, your host, and it has been a very long time since I've put out an episode on our beloved New York Giants. This is only like the first or second one going back to Thanksgiving of last season. Basically, last season was a lost season, and certainly by the second half of the year, the last quarter of last season, I should say, really. I really didn't have too much to talk about. It was really kind of just waiting out the string of games, see what's going to happen in the offseason in terms of coaches leaving, players who we sign or trade for, and getting ready for the draft. And it is draft week, and draft week is always awesome. It's kind of like a mid-season Christmas for us NFL fans. I absolutely love it, and I'm greatly looking forward to it. But what I wanted to talk about, I am going to have another draft special episode that I'm probably going to put out release Wednesday morning. But I wanted to get this episode in because I kind of wanted to, relaunch the program. I didn't want to force something to talk about over the past few months, and that's exactly what it felt like, forcing content, forcing conversation. And I just didn't want to do that. It wasn't worth my time, to be honest with you. My time is very, very valuable to me, and it just wasn't worth it to me. But it is draft week. I am looking forward to it. So I wanted to talk in this episode about where I feel like the state of this team is right now. And to sum it up, I'm going to try to keep this under a half an hour, which is unusual for me. But the state of the team of the New York Giants right now is I think dire. I'll be honest with you. I'm very, very concerned about the direction of this team. It does feel directionless. I haven't really felt this way probably since like the mid 1990s, after our Super Bowl winning teams from the late 80s and early 90s were pretty much dismantled because a lot of it having to do with at that time with the installation of the salary cap, and also key players getting older too. But a lot of it had to do with the salary cap, and you also had the Parcells era coaching staff that was gone. I mean, it was just an incredible coaching staff, incredible coaching tree. And in the mid '90s, those were definitely like lost years. And by the late '90s, the team had definitely restocked, gotten pretty good, gotten competitive, made the Super Bowl in 2000, and I don't think that was a fluke to this day. I think that Giants team was a good team in an NFC that year, to be honest with you, that wasn't all that great. But anyway, I digress, which I normally do. I'm going to try to refrain from doing that. But anyway, right now, man, we are at a crossroads, and I'm just not comfortable with where we are. In the past, like I've seen, like at the end of the Manning years, where even by like 2014, I'm like, this team needs to be rebuilt, and rebuild it around Eli, for the time being. But I'm like, this team needs to be rebuilt. I saw the writing on the wall as early as like 2014, and but I was always cool with rebuilds because it's a direction. A rebuild is a direction. At least you're starting from the ground up, but you got a direction, Um, and or if you're in the process of building a contending team, like we felt like we were, at the end of 2016 when we made the playoffs, and the end of 2020, 22, hey, it's a direction. you know? But right now, we've got so many question marks on this team that, like as much as I'm looking forward to the draft, it's I'm really, really concerned about all the holes on this team. And let me bring up my show notes over here. So, this was from what I can recall, the craziest past 8 months of Giants football that I can remember. And I've basically been waiting for this draft since at least week 6 of last season. Yeah, the season got better as the second half of the season as it went along, and but obviously it was what we saw last year was very disturbing. It was like a complete collapse for the first like 6 games of the year. The team looked lost, and I think that comes from the head down. And when I say the head down, I'm talking about the head coach on down. A complete breakdown, completely unexpected. If you want to, people want going into last season, if people wanted to say, well, I think 2022 is a bit of a fluke and they're going to regress and they're only going to have like 7 wins, maybe even 6 wins. I wouldn't have agreed with that at the time. I thought we were going to do pretty well last year. And but I was thinking, okay, even if we only had 7 or 6 wins, or 8 wins, that it would have been a much more competitive games. The team would not have looked as lost as it did throughout much of last season, especially the first at least 6 weeks of last season. And that was extremely worrisome, extremely scary. To lose is one thing. To look like you're not like you don't know what's going on, like you're unprepared, is something else. And I can't put that on the players. I have to put that on the coaching staff, starting with the head coach, Brian Daboll. Let me try to stick to my show notes over here because I always go off in a billion tangents. And like I said, I want to try to keep this to a half an hour. But you got to ask, what is the direction of this team right now? Ask yourself, what is the direction of this team, given all the holes that we have? Right now, I've got 5 big question marks at least. Number one, the most obvious, and that is the quarterback. It's I guess quarterback for 95% of the fans out there, 90% of the fans, is not a question mark. The answer is we need a new quarterback. And one that is going to be drafted. But that's regardless of what we come out, even if we say we even get like a JJ McCarthy or a Drake May, say we trade up and we get like Drake May. And I'm not gonna go too much into draft stuff today. I'm really not. I'll do that on the next episode, my draft episode. But even then, it's like I'd be, listen, I'd be psyched with Drake May. And I can get on board with the JJ McCarthy. I don't like taking JJ McCarthy at 6, but if he's there for us, we're not trading up for him. But if he's there for us, I can get on board with that at number 6. But even then, no quarterback is a surefire hit when they come to the NFL. I'll still be excited about it, but it's still going to be a question mark until that quarterback, whoever it is, eventually proves himself. I'm not even saying it has to be first season. It could be next season. But, until that quarterback starts showing growth and shows that he's an NFL quality starter, it'll be a question mark. Question mark number 2, wide receiver 1. We still don't have a wide receiver 1. If we're trading up for if we draft or trading up for a quarterback 2 on Thursday, quarterback 1, a new starting quarterback on Thursday night, there goes the wide receiver 1 this year in an extremely deep and not just top heavy wide receiver class, but extremely deep. But really, the more surefire, and no one's an automatic hit, but surefire wide receivers are going to be your number 1 wide receivers are, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. And you can maybe throw some other guys in there as real possibilities, like a few other guys in there as real possibilities. But, if you take the quarterback, you're probably not getting that wide receiver. And it all revolves around the quarterback anyway. I don't get too concerned about wide receiver. I really don't, because you could find wide receivers surprisingly in other rounds. So I don't get too concerned. For me, I'm more about like get your quarterback and get yourself a real offensive line. Okay. the wide receivers will come along. You'll develop one. You could trade for one, whatever, or sign one as a free agent. Get your quarterback and get your offensive line. And that's point number 3. The offensive line is a big question mark. Still to this day, all we have are, as a proven offensive lineman, as a real top-notch quality starter, is Andrew Thomas. And I'm not looking for other Pro Bowlers necessarily at the other positions on the offensive line. But the fact that we had to go out and spend free agency money, on 2 quality, quality offensive linemen for other teams. We'll see how they perform for the Giants. We'll see how they perform for the Giants. But some guys, a tackle and a guard who are coming in, who are pretty solid on other teams. But we had to spend money on that because of this organization's inability, which is astounding, inability to develop young offensive linemen outside of Andrew Thomas. And even Andrew Thomas, his rookie year, where it looked like he was having a hard time and he was kind of like, taking a step backwards, even his rookie year, they had to bring in an offensive line coaching specialist really to work with Andrew Thomas and the other offensive linemen a few years ago. So they didn't just have their offensive line coach. They had this guy who, came in to work one-on-one with these guys. It's fine that they did that. I don't have a problem. They could probably do that with every position group. I don't have a problem with it. It sounds like a good idea, but crap. I mean, how many teams really have to do that? And here we are, Evan Neal in the first round a few years ago, Josh Azudu in the 3rd round a few years ago, Marcus McKeithen in the 6th round a few years ago, JMS in the 2nd round last year, and not one of these guys has progressed. It's astounding. It's disturbing. And now you had to go out, understandably so. It's nothing wrong. You had to go out and spend money on veterans. And I pray to God that these guys play as solidly for the Giants as they played last year for the previous teams. I know one of them was the Raiders, and I forgot where the guard came from. I forgot, but whatever. Hopefully they play solidly and competently. But it's really disturbing. I mean, as of right now, you have an organization, and I realize this goes back we're in our 3rd regime that has been really, for the most part, unable to develop young offensive linemen. You had Justin Pugh, who was solid for the Giants. He was a good player for the Giants. And then you had Weston Richburg, who was a center who I think they drafted a year after Pugh, and he was solid. He wasn't a Pro Bowler, but he was a solid center. They got him in the 2nd round, like in 2014 or 2015. He was a solid player. And then you had Evan Neal, who was outstanding when he's healthy. Other than that, you had Evan Neal, a 1st round pick, JMS, a 2nd round pick. To not see one of those two, and I realized JMS was a rookie last year, but he basically regressed as the season went along. And Evan Neal hasn't progressed at all. And it's just disturbing that you have to go out after dedicating a lot of draft capital to young offensive linemen over the past few years, that no one's really been able to be developed, into a quality starter. I'm not even talking Pro Bowl, just a quality starter who can just go out. You don't have to worry about him. All right. It's disturbing as hell. It really, really is. So we're looking at question mark at quarterback, question mark at wide receiver 1, question mark up and down the offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas. But even with Andrew Thomas at this point, I am very worried about his injury history. Number 4, we have no veteran defensive backs. That is no veteran CBs, no veteran cornerbacks. A few years ago, we had Adoree Jackson, and we had what's his name, who wound up going to Bradbury, who wound up going to the Eagles. A few years ago, we had those 2 guys. We had veteran cornerbacks. We don't have one right now. As of right now, we're going to go into the season, and hopefully it's not going to wind up just being this way. I realize, there's still free agents out there. Maybe there's a trade you can make or something like that. But right now, you're going into this upcoming season with Deonte Banks, as your CB1, which I love Deonte Banks. I loved that pick last year. Absolutely loved it. I was shocked that he was still there when we were drafting at 20. I think we were think we moved up one spot, I think, to pick number 24 to get him. I was shocked he was still there. Absolutely shocked. And I love the pick. I absolutely love the pick. But you cannot go into this season, even if you draft a CB, say in round 2, you can't go into the season with just all young defensive backs. You cannot do that. And I don't want to see a crappy, way past his prime veteran cornerback, signed and be like, oh, this is our veteran. No, no. I want a guy who can play at a good level. It doesn't have to be an elite Pro Bowl level, but I want to see a good, solid, quality cornerback who knows what he's doing to hold things down back there, because you cannot go into the season with just a young secondary. You can't. So that's question mark number 4. And question mark number 5, head coach. What the hell was that last year that we saw? I have never seen a Giants team, even the bad ones, say like in the mid 1990s, so unprepared, week in and week out, looking so lost on all sides of the ball, offense, defense, and special teams, for like the first 5 or 6 weeks. It was disgusting. It was really disturbing. And that the word disturbing is going to be a theme throughout this video. I wish I could be optimistic. Usually I am. Usually I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm optimistic about this stuff, but I'm really concerned about the direction of this team. And the head coach, like, they were lost in the beginning of the first third of the season last year, at least the first quarter. Could say the first third of the season. Brian Daboll was taking play calling away from Mike Kafka, which I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I remember Jim Fossil did that around, I think, 2002, the year the Giants went to the playoffs and they wound up losing in that one of those historically bad games in the playoffs against the 49ers after entering the fourth quarter being up by like 18 points or maybe even more than that, and they wound up blowing it. And like mid-season, he took play calling away from Sean Payton. I think it was his last year as the offensive coordinator for the Giants. He took the play calling away, and the Giants' offense really took off after he did that. And we all know Sean Payton is an offensive genius, and Sean Payton had a very good reputation at the time too. But Jim Fossil was a very good offensive mind himself, and he didn't like what he was seeing. I don't blame him. I remember that season, like the offense was too talented to be the mediocrity that it was, like the first half of 2002. I think it was 2002. And Jim Fossil took over, and it played up to its talent with Kerry Collins at quarterback, Jeremy Shockey, Tiki Barber, Amani Toomer. It played up, and Ike Hilliard. It played up to its talent, and it was definitely a lot better. So I don't have a problem with that, but the defense looked horrible as well. And listen, you can maybe blame that on Wink Martindale, but when the offense looked like crap as well, and the special teams look like crap, I don't think it's just the defensive coordinator or the special teams coordinator who I think needed to go. The special teams coordinator needed to go, but I don't think it could just be that guy. I think it comes from the head down. There was way too many problems across the entire team for it to only be the defensive coordinator and or the special teams coordinator. So Brian Daboll, head coach of the year, his rookie year for the 2022 season, deservedly so, in my opinion. And then last year, completely beyond lost. It was absolutely horrendous. So, and yes, the quarterback was a huge problem. I admit that. I think most of you know that I was a Daniel Jones stan throughout his entire career with the Giants. I still love Daniel Jones. I still somewhat believe in the guy. Don't get me wrong. If I'm the general manager, I cannot, put my eggs in that basket. And if I have a chance to get a quarterback in this draft, I'm looking to do that. So don't get me wrong. But it's not just the quarterback either. As much as the quarterback looked the worst I've ever seen him, he did not look like a fifth-year player. He looked like a rookie year, like Zach Wilson. Okay. He looked completely lost, like he'd never been on an NFL field before. He looked bad outside of that second half in Arizona last season. Now, I don't put it all on him, but listen, by the fifth year, by your fifth season as a starting quarterback, he's been starting quarterback since the beginning of his rookie year. By the fifth season, there's just no excuse for that type of play, for looking that lost. And I realize the offensive line was horrible. It was horrible, but it all goes hand in hand. Quarterback, offensive line, playmakers, play calling, preparation, it all goes hand in hand. And by the fifth season, you've got to be able to work around a poor offensive line to at least keep your offense competent, to at least keep it competent. And I realized we didn't have a wide receiver one, but you still had Saquon Barkley out there. You still had some wide receiving talent out there. It wasn't, it wasn't, you had Waller out there who was healthy for like the first half of the season, and the ball wasn't getting to these guys. And I'm not going to play that game of just saying, well, it's just the offensive line or, or the playmaker, the wide receivers. It's not, it all goes together. But by your fifth years as a starter, as a starting quarterback in the NFL, you need to look like you belong. And he did not. He absolutely did not. So I am not ignoring that. All of you know I'm a Daniel Jones, I've been a supporter of his. I am not ignoring that. I'm not brushing it under the rug at all. Absolutely. But it wasn't just that. I feel very, very strongly about that. All right, let's talk about some of these offseason moves. Saquon Barkley, I think it was a huge, and this is my recap, because I didn't want to do an episode really over the past few months. I wanted to see everything that happened leading up to the draft, to think about the moves that were made, the moves that were not made, and to have this video. It's a state of the team based on everything that's gone on for the past few months. And so that's why I'm catching up. I'm giving you my thoughts on the stuff that's developed over the past few months. So I know it's kind of old news for all of you. We all know with the Giants, the moves they've made, but I want to talk about it. This is like my video diary. So here's my opinion on moves that happened over the past few months. Saquon Barkley, I think it was a huge mistake to move on from him. I think they should have paid the dude. You want to talk about money? I think you can find the money. I would have kept Saquon. If you show me a wide receiver one to pay, then that's fine. Then we can move on from Saquon. We don't have that. If we get that, if we get like a Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze at pick number 6, we potentially have our wide receiver one. You're still not really paying the guy all that much money though, because he's going to be on his rookie. He's going to be on his rookie contract. So unless you're showing me like we paid for Stephon Diggs, and I didn't want to trade for Diggs, don't get me wrong, but you're showing me something like we're paying for Diggs or whoever, a legit proven wide receiver one. Unless we were paying for that type of wide receiver, I believe we absolutely hands down should have kept Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is getting $13 million a season, I believe, from the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley is better than the vast majority of wide receivers out there who make much more money than that. I'm thinking like, for example, off the top of my head, Christian Kirk, who signed 2 off seasons ago with the Jaguars. And I'm not even sure if he's still on the team. He may have been traded elsewhere, but 2 seasons ago, he signed a contract for $18 million a year. That guy was never a wide receiver one. He was never going to be a wide receiver one. And that guy was making at least $5 million a year. And that was from 2 years ago. That was before the cap elevated by like $30 million this offseason. That was 2 years ago. He was getting $18 million a year. Saquon Barkley is a much better producer than Christian Kirk ever was and Christian Kirk ever will be. We even have a guy, brain farting on the name right now, but the wide receiver used to be on the Packers. Guy's been around for a while, who the Jets signed last offseason to buddy up with Aaron Rodgers. I think he was making $11 million a year. Lazard. He's making $11 million a year from what I recall. You're going to tell me Saquon Barkley's only getting $2 million a year more than Lazard? Now, I realize probably no other team was going to give Alan Lazard $11 million a year except for the Jets because they wanted to keep Aaron Rodgers happy. And I get that. I don't blame them. I'm not making fun of them or anything. But you get these wide receiver contracts. I think the NFL goes too wide receiver crazy, to be honest with you. You get a legit wide receiver one like a Justin Jefferson, you go ahead and you pay that guy. You pay what the street value is. Totally worth it. You got to overpay a little bit. Totally cool. No problem. But I think you get to the point, and it's not too far below those elite wide receivers where you start looking at a dime a dozen when it comes to wide receivers for the most part. I think they're legit tier 2 wide receivers, wide receiver 2, who are worth a good amount of money. I don't think there's all that many, though. And then you get a playmaker like Saquon Barkley, who is like a Christian McCaffrey light. Christian McCaffrey is the number one weapon out of the running back position in the NFL. I think that's inarguable in my point. Saquon Barkley is, not as good a version, but man, he's in the same conversation. He's the same type of player. And, the Eagles, now he's playing on a team that has balance, just like the 49ers. The two best teams in the NFC the past 2 years, the 49ers and the Eagles, believe in having a premier player at running back. And those are the two teams that have been to the Super Bowl the previous 2 seasons. They have balanced attacks, and they have premier players at running back. I think they're premier playmakers. People refer to them as running backs because they play out of the running back position. I think both players, obviously McCaffrey even more than Barkley, are more than just running backs. So in my opinion, they should have kept Saquon, who wanted to be here. I think that's a huge mistake. And that's something else that worries me about this regime that came over from Buffalo, is that, everyone was touting Joe Shane when he came over. Oh, Buffalo, they've done it right, the past 4 or 5 years. I think Buffalo put together a good team during, when Joe Shane was there as the assistant GM. But really it comes down to Josh Allen. And the way I never felt like they had some astounding offensive line. They never really had a running game. And that's something that worries me. Like, I like balance. Listen, you can be, have a great quarterback and have some really, really good wide receivers and maybe an elite wide receiver 1. You're still going to want a legitimate threat at the running game. I'm not saying it has to be a Barkley, but it can be a running game, where you've got like a 2 or 3 running back stable. But an offensive line that is good in the run game, you want that, and you want that threat. You want to be able to control a game through the running game at times. And I was concerned that this is just going to be a team that's just going to want to pass the ball a boatload, and the running game is really an afterthought. And I'm afraid that's just kind of what we're going to be seeing over here now. And obviously Daniel Jones is unfortunately he's not Josh Allen. So, we'll see. We'll see about that. But listen, man, I would have kept Barkley. I think it was a huge mistake not to re-sign him last year, to give him the money he was looking for. And now I don't believe that the Daniel Jones contract had anything to do with Saquon not getting his bag. I think they could have afforded it. They could have afforded it last season. I just don't buy that argument for 1 second. And he wanted to be here, and I think that's a huge mistake. Listen, if this offensive line, if they can develop into being a good offensive line where you're not just protecting the quarterback, but they're also able to be fairly dominant in the run game, and you want to have like a 2-headed or 3-headed, running back committee that's solid, that's good, awesome. But if these guys are just going to be, these running backs are just going to be kind of like, a complement only to the receiving game, these guys are just going to, run out around the tackles and just take a dump off pass. Color me not impressed. Xavier McKinney. I think they're going to miss Xavier McKinney. And now, I remember it was just a few years ago, we were extremely deep at the safety position. Now we've got some young guys that I'm intrigued by, but Xavier McKinney, I think, would have been, from what I know about the new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, I would have been really excited to see Xavier McKinney in Bowen's defense. I think Bowen would have given him the flexibility that he should have had all along in Wink Martindale's defense, and that is basically to play kind of like a freelancing center fielder, which he was playing very effectively for his first, I believe, 2 seasons under Patrick Graham. And that's when he was getting a boatload of interceptions. And McKinney plays the run very well. And I think it's a mistake, man. It's like you're losing this talent. And a few years ago, we were extremely deep at safety with Xavier McKinney, Julian Love, who had a very good year with Seattle last year. Giants fans were like, his first 4 or 6 weeks, Julian Love wasn't playing well. Well, neither was Okereke when he came to the Giants last year. He had to get used. Okereke, like Julian Love, needed to get used to a new defense, and they both did. Julian Love was always a very smart, savvy player, and he was outstanding his final season with the Giants at safety. A very cerebral player, a high football IQ, very good at what he does, and a great teammate. And they let him go. And I don't like the direction of this team. I don't like it. They're letting quality players and quality football minds go. And I'm extremely uncomfortable with what this regime has been doing over the past 2 years at this point. I really am. Offensive line I touched on before. I'll tell you, if I'm the owner, I'd be fairly hands off except for a few things. One, if you're going to trade like a very popular player, I have to have input on that. If you're going to trade draft picks, I have to have input on that because that's future capital. And you never know, I may have to fire the general manager and the head coach, and I don't want to leave the cupboard bare without knowing what we're doing here, what the plan is. But I'll tell you right now, so I'd be involved if I'm the owner of the Giants or any team. I'd be involved in stuff like that. Otherwise, I'd pretty much give my general manager free reign. At this point, if I'm the owner of the Giants, I would tell Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, until you can prove that you can develop young offensive linemen, you are not taking an offensive tackle in this draft in the first round. I would say not even in the second round, to be honest with you. You are not taking Joe Alt or Fashanu or Talisi Fuaga at number 6. You're not taking, even if you trade back with the Vikings. I'm not taking an offensive tackle in the first round. You need to prove that you can develop the offensive lineman, at least one. Give me one guy, then you can develop into a quality starter. And I'll start letting you use high-end draft picks on the offensive line again. I'm not doing that. If I'm dead serious, I'm not, saying this out of anger. This is my analysis over the past 6 months. When I look back, the organization, the Giants, have been horrible for the past 10 years at least at developing offensive linemen, including this current regime. And if I'm the owner, I'd say, listen, offensive tackle, listen, if the worst case scenario develops Thursday night, 3 quarterbacks are gone and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors are gone, you can go Roma Dunze, you can go, edge. Obviously, the fit, meaning value, would be offensive tackle. But I'd say to them, you have not proven that you can develop anyone on the offensive line. Why are we going to take yet another top 10 pick at tackle? It would be our third one, like in 5 seasons. Andrew Thomas, Evan Neal, and now another one. The only guy who's been developed was Andrew Thomas, and that was under the Joe Judge regime. I'm not letting you take an offensive tackle. I know some people think it makes sense. Normally, for most organizations, I'd agree with you. Not with this one. It's a huge concern of mine. I think it's legitimate. It's not overblown. Like this team, and it's not just this regime, but we're talking about this regime right now because of the current regime. They have been unable to, to develop in any way the young offensive linemen they've drafted over the past, 2 drafts. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And honestly, one more season of crap like this, I'd fire everyone. Joe Schoen would be gone. Brian Daboll would be gone. I'd hire a new GM and let that GM do whatever he wants to do. You can trade, whoever you want. Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas. You can start from scratch. I tell this, if this offensive line does not look at least middle of the pack, competent, and regardless of the veterans that you just brought in to sprinkle around the offensive line this year, if I don't see some of these offensive linemen, you can take a dude in the 3rd round this year if you want. You're not taking him in the first 2 rounds. I know it's a good offensive line class. You haven't earned that. You want to take someone in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round? That's totally cool. These guys better show progress. Some of the guys, I'm not saying all 4 guys from the past 2 draft classes, but give me at least 2 that show progress, that play up to a decent level. And if you can't do that, I'm telling you, man, I'd probably be done with Joe Schoen, definitely Brian Daboll, but Joe Schoen at the end of the season as well. All right, Brian Daboll. Let's talk about Brian Daboll. Last year, Brian Daboll. I'm very concerned about Brian Daboll. I don't care about this. People, oh, he's an angry guy. He gets angry. He pisses people off. I don't think that's it. I think there's something up with this dude where he doesn't just get angry. I have a feeling Wink Martindale can deal with someone, screaming in his ear or whatever. If defense is looking like crap. I have a feeling that Brian Daboll lashes out when things are going sideways. Lashes out kind of like a child is what is the feeling I have. Bill Parcells used to lash out at his coordinators. The Giants would be having a good season, but if there was like a bad series of plays, Bill Parcells would be yelling at Bill Belichick, or the offensive coordinator, Al Weiss or whoever. I don't think Tom Coughlin really yelled at his as coordinators, but whatever. Like these guys would get angry or yell at their coordinators and their players with purpose. I have a feeling Brian Daboll panics and lashes out of fear. I don't know if that's the right word I'm looking for right now, but I have a feeling he like lashes out, and that's what happened with Wink Martindale. And I don't agree with how Wink Martindale handled things last year. I don't. I don't think. I'm sorry the way it ended with him. I liked Wink. He's not blameless, but I have a feeling Brian Daboll was acting in a way where it got to the point where he was just totally like Wink Martindale was just like this, and he was like, I'm too old for this stuff. I have a feeling there was a lot of big baby attitude from Brian Daboll. It's my feeling on this. Same thing with Mike Kafka. Mike Kafka looks like a pretty cool, laid back dude. And I know he didn't act out the way Wink Martindale did at all. But there were certainly rumors, tons of rumors, that he was very unhappy with the situation with Brian Daboll, just like Wink. But Wink, went to the media behind everyone's back, leaking stuff and leaking his side of the story in midseason and stuff like that. You don't do that. Don't let it go there. I don't care what your head coach is saying, but I have a feeling Brian Daboll is like a big baby, and it wasn't just like it wasn't just being angry, or it wasn't just yelling. I have a feeling it's the way he was yelling, and in that where it was coming from, and I have a feeling it was kind of like a panicky thing, and he was probably saying a lot of stupid stuff. I got a really bad feeling about Brian Daboll. I really do off of last season. I really, really do. I have a feeling that he wasn't feeling like such a genius last season, and he was lashing out. I think that's where it was coming from. I have a feeling he was lashing out behind the scenes, and it wasn't just yelling. I have a feeling there was pettiness involved there with Brian Daboll. Wink Martindale seems like a pretty laid back dude, and obviously Mike Kafka does as well. And I think I'm really bothered by Brian Daboll. I really am bothered by him. And honestly, at this point, I don't believe in this regime. I don't believe in Joe Shane, and I don't believe in Brian Daboll. I don't like the way this team is being assembled. It's nothing against the new DC Brian. What's his name? Bowen or Bowden? Shane Bowen. I'm sorry, Shane Bowen. Nothing against him. I like some of these coordinators. It's like I said, like you look at McKinney going, you look at Julian Love last year, like, dude, he was a steal. I think he was making $6 million a year from Seattle, and he got the offer from Seattle, and he even went back to the Giants, and he showed them what the offer was, and they refused to match it. Is safety so worthless that you're not going to pay a dude $6 million a year? If your plan was to, okay, we're going to extend McKinney, then you could have done it that offseason. You could have said, okay, we're not going to keep Julian Love around for $6 million a year, because here he goes, Avery McKinney. We're going to give you a nice big fat contract right now. But they didn't do that. And now both guys are gone. And it makes no friggin' sense in my mind whatsoever. I don't like what's going on with this team. And I'm at the point where I do not believe in Joe Shane, and I do not believe in Brian Daboll. I don't. Let's see. Okay, Daniel Jones was horrific last year. I talked about him before. I'm not, listen, I've defended the guy for, forever. I always believed in him forever. in up until early last season. So I touched on him and whatever. I already talked about Daniel Jones. All right, I want to start wrapping this up. The trade for Brian Burns. Originally, I was totally on board with it. I'm like 6th round pick and whatever other. I think they gave us 6th and like a future 3rd or 6th. I don't remember, something like that. That's cool. This is a good player. And then they gave him the $30 million contract. And that's even with the big boost in the salary cap this year. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. If you're talking about like JJ Watt in his prime, cool. I like Brian Burns a lot, and I really wanted him. I wanted the Giants to target this dude. $30 million a year. But I'll tell you, if this were a team that I felt were definitely on the ascent, like I did at the end of 2022, I'm like, I believed in the talent this team had, and I didn't think like 2022 was a fluke at all. And I still don't think that 2022 is a fluke. I don't. This team is shedding talent, and I don't like it. Saquon, Julian Love, Xavier McKinney, just to name a few over the past few years. Heck, they almost cut Darius Slayton 2 off seasons ago. In the past 2 seasons, the guy's basically been their best wide receiver. That's not a knock against him at all. He's not a wide receiver 1, but the dude was never even should have been entertained to have been cut. It never made any sense. This is a dude who's consistently healthy, who goes out and produces. He doesn't elevate the offense. He's not that quality wide receiver. But Darius Slayton's always been a quality starter. And hell, he's like, what is he making, $6 million a year? He's bang for the buck, much better, or just as good, at least bang for the buck, much better than many wide receivers out there. And believe me, he's a no wide receiver 1 conversation at best. He's probably a wide receiver 2 at best. Even wide receiver 2 is the money they make. He's right there with them. And you were going to cut this dude 2 seasons ago? How was that even in the conversation? And Darius Slayton, you want in a contract extension. I'm totally cool with that. I really am. Anyway, let me wrap this up with Brian Burns, because I got to use the bathroom real badly anyway. I've been drinking iced coffee and it's flowing through me like crazy. But Brian Burns, on paper, I like the idea of Brian Burns. I always loved that player. However, what's the direction of this team? I feel like we kind of got this big name player, big contract, and I don't even know the direction of this team. I feel like this team does need to be rebuilt. And so I don't know if it makes any sense now in hindsight, now that I've had time to think about it. Does it make any sense to have traded for Brian Burns? But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm done. I'll have a new draft video out tomorrow. And that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. I got to use El Baño real quickly. Here's my outro, and I'll catch you later, everyone.